Shauna, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm excited to hear about your story. And so let's just dive in. I would love for you to talk about how you came up with your idea and also like what you were doing at the time when you came up with your idea.
Sure. Well, what I was doing at the time was trying to survive with a 24-month-old and a newborn. I have a history of autoimmune disease. I was born with neutropenia, also called leukopenia, which basically means that my body doesn't produce a normal white blood cell count. In my teens, I was also diagnosed with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and parasites simultaneous to the discovery of my white blood cell issue. So I had a history of using food and nutrition and alternative healing methods to guide me to superior health. And when my second child was born, I began to slide down a path that felt really intimidating and very reminiscent of my teenage years, where I was depleted and just feeling like I was barely hanging on. And so, in an effort to try to abate some of those symptoms and the impending reality of sheer burnout, I tried everything that I could find on the market to supplement my diet. I had been breastfeeding already at that point for 2 straight years. I breastfed through my pregnancy with my second child. So, as you know, breastfeeding strips pounds of minerals from the body. And so at that point, I really felt like there was not enough I could eat to satiate me. At any given hour of the day, I could be found munching and I was always dissatisfied. So I realized that supplementation and a really comprehensive food regimen would be what would really help support my body as it had in my early teens. But nothing I tried made me feel any different. I tried all kinds of super green blends and protein powders and collagen, which had been recommended by my doula for stretch marks, by the way. Now, of course, I'm focused more on the anti-aging properties, but I really tried everything I could get my hands on to feel like myself, and nothing was working. And at that point, I said to my husband, I need to take matters into my own hands and basically create my own personal medicine cabinet of supplements and nutrition that I feel will keep me from reverting once again to a place where I'm not the woman I know I was meant to be.
Right. And did you know at that point, like what was missing, or were you kind of just looking?
I had a pretty good idea because I've been studying nutrition my entire life informally, and I've worked with a number of alternative health practitioners since the time I was 14. I've been seeing Chinese herbalists, osteopaths, homeopathic practitioners, functional medicine doctors. I really have a tribe, an extensive tribe of people I consult with, and the needs of our body, changes as time progresses. And especially after having kids, my needs shifted pretty drastically, but I had already educated myself about what I felt would be the fundamental supplements that would keep me going, in particular fish oils and a certain, a protein powder that I could take every time after breastfeeding, the collagen, and then something to boost my immune system. So I had the olive leaf extract in the mix. All of those things were already part of my protocol. I just wanted to ensure that the standard of purity was one that I could trust and count on, and that it wasn't abhorrent to consume, because some of the flavors of these powders are really just not in agreement with my palate.
Yeah.
I'll put it
And they're also not safe. I mean, a lot of them have like fillers, or they're just filled with things that you don't really know. So you bring up a good
metals.
point. So
That's why we do spirulina is in the mix, because that detoxifies heavy metals as well. And there's just unfortunately so much in our diet that even if we're eating organic and counting our cups of vegetables every day, it's not like we're eating the way our grandparents did. The soil is depleted of minerals. Things in transport take, sometimes days to arrive at the grocery store and then sit on shelves for days before we even put them in our fridge. And then they're waiting around and wilted. So, we're already eating food, even if we're eating seasonally and picking produce directly from the farmer's market. Like, we're not in the position our grandparents were, where we could just pluck things from really mineral dense, soil and feel like we're getting all the nutrients we need. And by the way, most of us don't eat seasonally, and that's
Right,
part of the
exactly.
beauty of living in California, but it also isn't really from an Ayurvedic, perspective, it's not in alignment with the requirements of our body's needs as they
Right.
shift through seasons.
So you had this idea and now you're like, okay, how did you know where to go to manufacture it and find like the purest ingredients? Like, was that new to you or did you already have a background in that?
It was completely new to me, but my husband did have some experience. And so he was a great resource. I spoke with several other friends in the industry who had done similar things, not direct competitors, but people I knew who had developed their own products and businesses. I asked friends to connect me with people they knew. I mean, it was a big sort of network of interrogations and investigations. What was most helpful for me in terms of finding manufacturers and labs to connect with was I went to Expo West. These trade shows are really helpful because everyone shows up wanting business, and it's a beautiful exchange between people who require services and people who are able to offer them. And so I initially started out there, and then as I progressed in the industry and my connections became more intimate, I was able to pivot at times when certain relationships were no longer serving the company. But trade shows are a great place to start.
That's great. Since you've started, have you brought on full-time people or have you kind of done it all like outsourcing and consulting?
We're a team of 5.
Okay. Wow.
And so it's very intimate, which means we're all slightly overworked, but we're really happy. I wore a lot of hats initially. So for the first, year and a half, I was customer service with a pseudonym. I did all of the copy for our website and newsletters. I was responding, to customer service. I mean, like everything that I could possibly do. And my husband was helping a lot with marketing. So, it really was a grassroots kind of organic process. We asked friends to help us fill in the gaps, who had just enough qualifications, right, to like learn, because I was learning and I didn't feel like I required anyone to have mastery over anything I was asking them to do. It's more just, for me at least, when I'm hiring people and considering who to work with, it's how open are you to the process of change and evolution and compromise and working together, as a team.
Yep. And so once you launched, what was your strategy to get sales, as marketing? Are you doing wholesale or are you trying to do
we're direct to consumer. We're direct to consumer. And at some point that might change. I really feel like it's super important for companies to, at least in my case, start small, manage the inventory you've got carefully. You don't want to not sell product, right? You don't want to have a bunch of leftover product, and to be really just meticulous with those choices about how and when to move forward. So we're direct to consumer. Digital marketing has been huge. Facebook, Instagram, ad campaigns require a lot of experimentation, as anyone in the marketing
world
knows.
So are you doing that all in-house or did you hire a company to help you?
No, we're doing it all in-house.
In-house. Because it gets expensive too, I have heard.
It's incredibly expensive. But, you start with a smaller number. And if you see it's working, you raise the price. Within a 24-hour time frame, you can throw in more money into the pot and see what's working and what's not. And so,
have you found Facebook to be better for you or like a Google?
Facebook has been primarily where we run our ads.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. And then as far as like financing, have you done that completely on your own or have you had to go through funding?
I haven't had to go through funding, but I did choose to accept the offer of some investors. So I do have a couple of investors. I'm fairly sure I wouldn't be where I am as quickly, without their support and guidance. Well, I shouldn't say guidance, more contribution. The guidance has been in-house, but it probably would have taken me longer to get to where I'm going without their contribution. And I've been really grateful for that. I do have as much at stake as they do, which I think is really important for investors to see, that you're willing to have some skin in the game, that if if they lose, you lose too.
So I'm glad you say that, because as an angel investor, that's one of the things I always have to, like, my money is not going towards paying you. Like, I need to know that like your skin's in the game and that you're going to, like, if it fails, you're going to feel it as much as I do. Because when it's not your own money, and you don't have money invested in a company, you kind of forget how painful it is to lose money.
Exactly. And not to say that sweat equity isn't as valuable, and there
Yeah.
are lots of different arrangements that work for people depending on their circumstances. Not everyone is as blessed as, I was to be able to contribute an equal amount to start. But what I will say is it's very motivating when you know that your bank account's going to dwindle. And it also, for me at least, has made me particularly cautious about expenditures. I mean, that's why if there's anything we can do in house, we do. We
Yeah.
try it first ourselves. I've never had an office, even pre-COVID. I work from home. My husband, who helps me significantly, works out of the garage. Any overhead that isn't necessary should immediately be taken off the table. We're
Mhm.
just not big spenders. We save our money for the campaigns primarily.
That's a good idea.
My husband and I designed all of the labels. We were shipping initially from our garage. For a large period of time, our garage was our warehouse. Manufacturers would send product to us and we would mail directly. And we got to know our UPS man very well. Now we sell directly from our site and on Amazon, but starting out, we wanted to cut overhead as much as possible. And I recommend that anyone starting a company who doesn't have a safety cushion to rely on or fall back on, really consider in advance of starting the company where you can cut costs in your life in general, personally, as well as, in your business. So where you live, what you eat, what you do and don't do, those all affect whether or not you'll have additional funds to spend on the company. And, don't spend it all quickly.
It's true. What have you found to be the hardest part about starting your company?
For me, the hardest part has been not being able to spend energy where my heart is. What I love to do most is formulate products and have incredible conversations with women like you and directly connect with customers about their particular health struggles. Those are the things I'm passionate about. The majority of my time is not spent doing those things. It's accounting for inventory, it's perfecting copy, it's finalizing labels, it's dealing with shipping issues. It's all of the nuances of making a business work. And so when I'm doing those things, which can sometimes be cranky making, if it feels like you're too far from your soul's purpose or the reason why you started your company, for me at least, it's helpful to sort of understand that every single thing I do for the business is ultimately serving people. It's all in service of my goal to provide, really pure, high quality, sustainable nutrition to the people consuming it. So even if it doesn't feel directly motivating to me or thrilling, it's all part of the same offering.
That's great. Now, did you ever think you were going to be an entrepreneur and start your own
No,
company?
no, not at all. I was a singer-songwriter
Oh,
for over a
wow.
decade. And I just wrote a really jazzy version of Rockabye Baby for a girlfriend who just had a baby. And I'm still singing, but no, it was kind of born out of my compulsion to get my needs met physically, which because of my history of just really oppressive ailments that took me so long to resolve, became something that I needed to do for myself first and foremost. I was solving the problem of my own
Mhm.
desperation to feel well. And then it just kind of felt obvious that other women might want this too, and men. We have a lot of men taking our supplements, but it really became first and foremost, a mission for me to prove that I could meet my own needs and
Mhm.
to get my body what it deserved. I never sort of like as a kid was like, I want to grow up and have my own business. I never think of myself as particularly business minded, but it's funny because growing up, my dad was always like, you'd be a great businesswoman. You'd be so great. Because I love to negotiate and I love to talk and I love, ideas and creativity. And I tend to be sort of unstoppable when I get something in my head. I want to see it through. But no, I really didn't have the plan.
That's great. Is there anything you wish you knew before going into this? You're like, oh, wait, if I'd known that, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Or if I'd known that, I would have saved money or I would have done it differently.
First of all, there's nothing that would have stopped me from starting the company, but I think to have realistic expectations about how many things go wrong
Hmm.
is probably appropriate and helpful so that people don't become discouraged the minute things crumble. and dissolve. I mean, COVID was particularly challenging. We're a small company and we're mostly in-house, and I have two small kids, and the pandemic started and suddenly they were at home. There was a lot to reconfigure. And so what I would say is that, I wish someone had said to me going in, a lot's going to go wrong. And that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you shouldn't pursue it or that it's not going to be successful. It means that, every time something goes wrong, you have an opportunity to upgrade your system, to refine your approach, to re-examine the contribution of each team member, to see where you're efficient and where you're not, to see where you're wasting time or money. There are a lot of different things that can be reevaluated as a consequence of things going wrong. And initially I was like, oh no, boo-hoo, poor me, we can't ship internationally anymore because of COVID, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, no, but now I have more time to focus on my domestic customers. And here's how I can take advantage of that and use this time differently. Everything is an opportunity. And so if we choose to see it that way, there will probably be some level of success. And if there isn't, it doesn't mean it's not the right idea. It may just be the wrong time. But nothing has to be, this black and white, all or nothing when there are struggles. With companies, every day, there will be something that goes wrong, small or large, almost every day. There isn't a week that goes by where I had labels that came in 3 days ago. They were wrong. Like all the labels were wrong. We had to start from scratch. People were expecting product. Early on in the company, that would have felt like really daunting to me. And now I have perspective that like things go on, like we have trusted customers at this point. There are a lot of really beautiful, patient people who are supportive of small business owners. And so when a lot of things were going wrong initially, because I had taken way too much on too fast and didn't have a big enough team, I wrote letters every single time something went wrong or someone was upset. I wrote a personal letter. So, hey, I'm still waiting on my order. My order hasn't come through. And that's because I just hadn't processed it because I was, so so busy that day. I just had forgotten to process in the most basic fundamental thing, get the person their product, right? Like I hadn't done it. And I would write an email and say, I'm so sorry, Kristen, that you haven't gotten your product. Please accept 20% off this order. And I'm going to throw in a greens powder, and then someone who was so aggravated and upset and felt like I had let them down suddenly was a huge fan and really supportive of what I was trying to do because they received an apology and they got more than they were originally asking for. So good customer service has gotten me so much farther than I had realized. And really, I was just doing it on principle, ethically, not to receive more loyalty or allegiance from these people. I just felt awful and wanted to make it up to them. And as a consequence, I had people writing back, I will be a customer for life because I had offered them something in response to their concern or complaint.
That's great. So, do you, I know you're a mom and you just addressed this a little bit with COVID, but is there any tips or tricks or anything that makes your life more efficient in balancing, the home work life, as far as like keeping all the balls in the air?
Yeah.
Any tips that you have that you can pass on?
We could do a whole podcast on this,
right?
Seriously. But number one, empower your kids to do things for themselves whenever possible. That I had to learn out of necessity because I just didn't have enough time. I realized I was sort of spoiling them and I hadn't been aware of it, but I was kind of like letting them get away with not picking up the messes they had created or contributing to mealtime preparation or, I was sort of trailing around them to a certain degree, cleaning up their messes, literally and figuratively. And, obviously you can't do this with a newborn or a 1-year-old, but my kids were barely 3 and barely 5. Days into being 3 and 5 when lockdown occurred. So they're small people. And I realized that my daughter wasn't capping the pens. And that was taking a lot of time from me every day, that her markers rather, and it takes time to cap markers. And so it was like, oh, wait a minute, you don't get to open 15 pens and then not close them. The other thing is, why are there 15 pens? That was the other thing that I went through, was like this process of just reevaluating our entire lives from a material standpoint and how much time and upkeep our stuff was requiring. One of the biggest stressors I had time-wise was dealing with the domestic necessities of running a house. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Why am I washing 14 shirts? There's only like 3 shirts my daughter actually chooses from her closet every day, but she'll pull out 5 others, to dig through and get to those 3. So I boxed up. I literally, Mimi, boxed up like half of our house. It felt so cathartic. I spent a couple of weeks, maybe more like a month, really studying what the kids gravitated towards, what they wanted to wear, what snacks they loved. And I put everything else away. Snacks, for instance, also, was something that they would ask, Mommy, I'm hungry. I need a snack. Okay. So at the beginning of the day now, because of COVID, I put everything that's available to them throughout the course of a day in a lunchbox. And then there's a place on a low shelf in the fridge for the refrigerated stuff. I'm like, go for it. Whenever you're hungry, you can help yourself to your snack. Whereas I used to be running in and out of the kitchen in the middle of meetings, between meetings and Skype calls. And, I'm in the middle of writing copy and the kids like, I want a snack. And it was like, wait a minute, this isn't their problem. It's my problem that I've created, they've just fallen into the paradigm that I've created of them.
Especially when you know that they go to, my daughter went to a Montessori school and you're like, they did all that stuff there. Why can't they do it at home?
Maybe
And
I
that's
was
when
a Montessori preschool teacher.
That's right.
And yet, I didn't implement it in the home, because when you are not forced to be efficient, sometimes it's just easier to play the short game versus the long game, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're in a marathon here with COVID and in life. And I want to teach my kids to be self-empowered little individuals.
But do you feel like, so for me, I feel like I've kind of been that way for a while, just because out of having 5 kids and trying to work. But then I feel guilt, right? Because I'm feeling guilty, like, I don't make my kids lunch boxes. I used to make my kids lunch boxes, but then I realized everything was coming home.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, this is a waste of time, my time, a waste. They don't like it, obviously. And, it's a waste of money. So now I'm like, okay, everyone go on Amazon. As long as it's healthy, you guys can buy your snacks and whatever you want for lunch, and you guys make your own lunch. And everyone's happier. It's a win-win.
You're creating little entrepreneurs.
But then I'm the one who's like feeling bad, like I'm not the mom like making the lunchbox. So then I start feeling.
But these
like
are
I'm
very
not,
outdated paradigms of what it means to be a good mother. And so the perspective, it needs to shift to, I am not the mom who's making my kids lunches. I'm the mom who's empowering my children to make wise choices for what goes into their bodies, so that they grow into adults who make wise choices of what goes into their bodies. And they know how to navigate technology, and they know how to navigate getting things from one place to another and making it all work, and then throwing their trash away. That's, to me, a much more valuable offering as a mother than there are a million ways to show your child love and care, right? Like, I'm sure when they're hurt, you don't tell them to get over it and, like, go fend for themselves, right? So I feel like we save our energy now for what's really meaningful and valuable. And what's valuable isn't making a child's lunch necessarily. It's showing them that you're watching them when they're putting on a show, a theatrical performance, or, my son created this whole world, we're not at home right now. And so they have no toys in the house we're staying in. And what they have available to them right now are bubble wrap and Amazon cardboard boxes and some markers. That is it. So they spent 4 hours, my son and daughter, making a whole world out of cardboard boxes and coloring them. And, it's like,
that's great.
Their imaginations exploded. And so sometimes I feel like less is more, and they'll figure it out in a way that's actually much more appropriate to them and suited to their personalities and way of doing things. You might have a child who eats tiny amounts of food all throughout the day, is more of a grazer, and you might have a kid who wants giant meal. It's like, that's a great thing for them to learn about their bodies. But if they don't have a chance to have that independence and autonomy, they won't even know what their needs are. Right?
No, it's true. I always say, and like I say to my kids, like my 5-year-old, I'm like, you guys would actually be fine. As long as you have Amazon, could stay in this house all week without an adult, right? As long as you have someone being able, how to order and bring in food, you'd be like set. You guys are so independent. So it is true. It is very true. Okay. So just to close up, is there anything that you would say to somebody who is listening that's thinking about leaving their company or thinking about starting a business or in the downs of their company and kind of struggling. I feel like our community is like there for women who are entrepreneurial that are like, it's very lonely, right? To be an
Yes.
entrepreneur. You kind of have to put on a good face and not really show all your cards all the time.
Right.
So is there anything you would say to anybody who's listening right now that could inspire
I
them?
mean, number one, if you have an idea that you believe in, don't give up on it because it's not working the first take, right? The first try is just a first try, and there are lots of drafts, and incarnations of things. I just finished a memoir, and I literally sent my first query letter to an agent yesterday. I was thinking about all the drafts that I went through, of just query letters, right? Just to see if I could get an agent. There's a lot of different, ways that an idea can manifest, and just keep working on it and refining it until it feels like something that the world is ready to receive. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. I asked everyone I knew. I was shameless about asking for help, about people defining words that I didn't understand, consulting marketing books, but mostly just really joining networks of people, whether it's, through Facebook or through friends, asking friends of friends, hey, do you know anyone who I can talk to about this particular thing? I just got an email from a friend whose friend is starting a small publishing company and wanted some, basic info about shipping. That, there were some questions she wanted answered about shipping. And my friend said, can she call you? I said, of course she can. I was so grateful to have people to call when I was in that phase. It's very important, I think, to understand that like everyone wins when people help each other. Like there's enough in the pot for everyone. No one, I feel like, unless there's some proprietary blend that you don't want to share with a competitor, which is totally legitimate. But all in all, like we're supposed to be working, in conjunction with one another and merging ideas and then all sort of evolving simultaneously. So I would just say ask for help and really don't be afraid of what you don't know. And if something doesn't seem to be working, you can table it and try it again later. It was helpful for me personally to have a little bit of a financial safety net. This is just a kind of basic disclaimer, isn't a requirement at all. But for me, I did have some savings to draw from because I didn't pay myself for quite a long time. And so not everyone knows when they first start a business that it could be easily a couple years before you're making money. And then when you are making money, you may need to make the decision between whether you want to pay yourself or continue to reinvest in the company and expand the company, for a bigger payoff, later on. And so we're in that conversation right now. But ultimately, even if it's just like you've got a couch, you can sleep on, a good friend, who will cook some food for you if you're sort of down and out while you're not able to pay yourself, set yourself up, to understand that you're going to be maybe putting a lot of money in and a lot of time in without taking much out. And so get that organized in advance. But there's no reason not to pursue it just because, you don't have tons of money and tons of time. I'm just a believer that everyone should follow their heart and their dream.
Right. No, that's great advice. Or they squeeze it in if they stay working and do it at night or do it on the weekend. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
What time you can find.
I wrote my book at 4:45 a.m. every morning. That's all the time I had. I woke up at 4:30, started writing at 4:45 and was available to my children by 6:30. And I wouldn't have been able to write it otherwise while running the company, while having 2 children at home during the pandemic. So you figure out real quickly what your priorities are. Like if you're not willing to make certain sacrifice, I really got into Mad Men recently. I had somehow skipped that brilliant show way back when it first aired. And I would love to spend all night watching it. I'm having this love affair with Don Draper. I just can't wait to get into bed and watch it. But guess what? That means that I then won't be able to get up at 4:45. So every night and every day, you have to make decisions about what's important. And it's not to say that you should drop everything and never see a friend and never take a walk. All of those things create balance that create sustainability personally and professionally. But there are certain sacrifices that will need to be made initially, for sure.
Right. Like Mad Men.
Mad Men was out for a while. And so, by the way, so was just doing anything at night. I was going to bed between 8 and 8:30 so that I could get up at 4:30 because I don't fall asleep right away. So, that's something that for me became just part of my routine. It's no longer necessary. I finished the book. So now I'm back to waking up at 6.
Okay.
You figure out what's consuming your time and what's truly valuable and important to you and rearrange and reconfigure accordingly.
This has been amazing, Shauna. And anybody who wants to check it out, it's Alaya, Alaya Naturals.com. You can go on there and try her products.
And I've created a discount code for your people at Badass20. So 20% off your first order of anything that you want to try.
Well, thank you so much. That is awesome. So we'll also put that in the show notes for anybody who's listening and driving and can't take it down. But thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure. I really appreciate it.